It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello friends, I am Rob, and this is my State of the Dungeon address. This is the State of the Dungeon address for the game that took place on the 16th of September in the year 2021. The game was 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons in the Darkest Dream adventure from Gooey Cube. Now, the characters had been doing pretty well this morning so far. They had already saved a couple of clerics from getting murdered by a conspiracy. They had solved some issues of one of their lead card dealers getting his pockets picked, and a few other encounters, so it had not been a quiet morning. However, because of some of the action they'd had, some of the other members of the troop were kind of getting a little jealous. It seemed like they were getting all the really interesting action. The rest of them were just dealing with pickpockets, drunks, occasional fights, but nothing too serious. So the group was off in the western side of the encampment and decided they were going to continue their tour around the outskirts of the camp. They were kind of trying to head towards the Sellers Row because they had seen that there were some interesting things to be had at the Sellers Row that they can now afford. They found some gold at the old well, and now might be the time to start filling out some of their stuff. So first of all, they were going to stop by the places. So they found the old oak tree and the stage. Now this oak tree is a big tall thing in the middle of the clearing that the Hanatas use. So they put up a stage on one side of it so that people could be entertained, and this would be something that's gives the other members of the troupe who don't necessarily have a role in the big top or the magical skills to be in the Tents of Illusions, or the fighting skills necessarily to be at the wrestling ring, test of skill, things like that. So these would be your bards who travel around and provide entertainment. This would also be a place for younger members of the troupe to practice their skills. All across the table, this would include pickpockets, picking pockets of some of the customers. This would be the young spell dancers trying out some of their dance routines in front of a live audience without having to actually use the magic of their dances in the Tent of Ales. So the group gets in there and they see there's a large crowd, and there's two bards who are there, and Grelda and Grayson, and there were the two junior spell dancers who were practicing their moves. They, again, they're only 12. They don't have the power yet to entrance men's minds, or minds of anybody, really, or to enact actual magic with their dances. But they're still gifted dancers, and they still have to practice a lot, so they're doing this. Unfortunately, at the front of the group of all these carnival goers, there's one loud, really obnoxious drunk. And as they're wrapping up their set, he starts calling out to the girls to be more risque and just crass. To be honest, I even felt uncomfortable narrating it to some extent, but this guy is a crude laborer who's drunk and obnoxious. And that immediately put everybody off. And he also called them the Shazat, which again is kind of a curse word to, not a full curse word, but it's definitely a demeaning word to the members of the Hanatas. So they were already ready to walk off the stage. This guy starts coming up onto the stage, cheered on by his fellow drunken friends. Well, the group has already appreciated that term Shazat is definitely not something they like to hear. And they wanted to make sure that these folks didn't get hurt. Grayson and Grelda are not the kind of warriors that the player characters are. They may have more experience as bards, but they're not fighters. definitely. So they moved up to try to get through the crowd. Haranen was definitely showing some skills in getting through the crowd quickly, and at this point the group kind of split up. Glyn panned off to the side. He wanted to climb up into the tree, possibly to start shooting at people. Again, the prohibition against shooting unarmed people is, I don't know if he just forgot or something, or maybe he just wanted to see the surrounding area. I don't know, but he panned out. The two ladies, Brandel and Vanessa, they skirted off to the left side to try to get around the crowd rather than plowing through it. But Haranen and Crendon definitely were able to use their various skills to get through the crowd as much as they could, a much shorter route. At this point, the drunk climbs up onto the stage, and he starts threatening the girls. Now, of course, Grayson wasn't going to let that happen, so he interposed himself between the man and the girls, and tried to hold him off. But the guy is big and strong and drunk and unreasonable. Grayson tried, but this guy was ready to just shove him away and still go after these girls who he called out. The girls, of course, are non-combatants. They are not ready for this. And he shoves his way past Grayson, who, tagged him with a shot but couldn't put him down. And Grelda actually drew a sword and tried to put herself between the man and the girls. However, at this point, Haranen is kind of falling behind a little bit. Crendon just knifes through the crowd and immediately decides that's where a sleep spell needs to be. Amid all these drunks, try to catch as many people as you can. He caught a couple of bystanders because it's an indiscriminate spell, but he did manage to put 2 of the drunks down. This left a bunch of them still standing, 5 of them. And out of them, 2 of them were still enjoying the show. 3 of them decided they were going to turn and they were going to beat the daylights out of Crendon. Well, that wasn't what he had intended, clearly. But all the same, he did his job of distracting them away from the girls, which, he's honorable that way in trying to stop them. And at this point, the 3 drunks came up and they tried to beat him up. They couldn't land a blow. My dice went completely cold. Which was actually pretty good because Haranen came in like a bulldozer and he speared through 1 and flattened all 3 of them with a great roll. But Haranen's dice were hot that night. And just leveled the whole bunch of them. Now the downside was the ones that were still upright started kicking him and attacking him, which, he's a fighter. He's kind of good for it. And at this point, Brandel and Vanessa had run over, and they were trying to get up onto the stage. And the stage was not very high, so they scooted up. And immediately they started trying to knock the drunk's legs out from under him. They tried knocking him out with a blow to the base of the skull with a dagger. Good tries, certainly. Grayson kept trying to pummel the guy unconscious, and it's just to get him away. Things weren't looking real good. And then Glyn decided that going up the tree isn't going to do any good. I'm out of this. I can't do anything up there except shoot people. So he came up from behind the stage, and while this drunk was getting ready to just push by Grelda, all of a sudden, whoosh, there's Glyn right in front of him, sword pointing in his face. And he pulled out the Cerak short sword that he had encountered. And all of a sudden, now the guy is looking at, 30 inches of steel pointed right in his face. Sharpened steel and a wiry but tough-looking elf, He suddenly had to think about that. That sobered him a bit. And then after that, he got mobbed. Just pummeled. There really wasn't anything else to do at this point. It was just beat him down. And a couple of quarterstaff blows and strikes aimed to subdue and knock out rather than kill eventually felled him. And it was just mop-up after that. Haranen was choke-slamming people. Crendon got in his shots. It was just a glorious melee, but over pretty quickly, honestly. Crendon did manage to get up on stage. He tried to stop the drunk again as a last desperate attempt by using hideous laughter on him. I was making his saving throws. Wasn't landing a lot of blows for him, but he was making saving throws. So they soaked up some of the party's magic with this little encounter. But when it was all said and done, they actually made it into part of the act, and the crowd left pretty happy. The brave Carnivallers triumphed. The girls danced a little bit more. Tips were had. The party got the belt purse off of the big lug, and it turned out he actually had quite a bit of silver on him. So that was pretty good. So they drifted off after the encounter was over, and again, too, by the way, two other of the Hanatah's adventuring group, the other Zatis, came through, and they saw that again, these guys had mopped everything up before anybody else could show up, and they're like, "You guys are everywhere," but they were. That's just kind of how this has gone. So then it was time for shopping. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? Smedley found them. Specifically Haranen, who he is now looking up to as kind of his idol. After all, Crendon's been kind of a preachy creep. Brandel has insisted that she's evil, and that her gold flecks in her skin are the evil coming out, so he's a little nervous about her. Glyn is definitely cold. Nothing to latch onto there. And Vanessa's just kind of there, doesn't really do anything with them. But Haranen actually is like, yeah, okay, you're okay, kid. And he's bonded in a way, kind of a strange, obnoxious way, but a way nonetheless. And of course, Smedley, of course, is everybody's favorite NPC. Bless you. And as a fun recurring character, I'm not going to say he's the bane of the party's existence, but the group definitely rolls their eyes when there's any danger that Smedley could show up, because, well, he's a little obnoxious creep. But more to the point, the group goes to Sellers Row. They want to spend their money. Specifically, Crendon primarily wanted to spend money because he had gathered up a pretty healthy amount, enough that he could buy some of the items he was looking for. And one of the items he was looking for was from some glass blowers, and they had a monocle that he had his eye on. He knew there was some magic in there. His skill with the arcane is enough that he can, find little bits of lore and information. And of course, the way we do things in this particular game is once they have found an item, they get a card with the item on it, but it also has all the card's powers. So it does actually reveal the powers of the items they find as they go, and the group seems to like that quite a bit, rather than mucking around with not daring to touch your... Ah, here's Smedley, in case anybody is missing Smedley. Yes, we love Smedley. But in case anybody wants to not touch an item because it might be cursed and not deal with anything until you've had an identify spell or detect curse spell cast upon it, this way they know what the item is, and they take it and they use it and they have fun with it right away. So he got the monocle, and it really works well for him, having a nice effect that he can see the relative health of everybody around him, which can also see effects that are on them too. It's kind of cool. And I have to remember to ask him when he's telling me he's using this in the future. There were other items, though. As they were going up and down the row, they found other people who had things that they hadn't really looked into too hard before. For example, there's an alchemist with a variety of potions, but the group just didn't have the money for these potions. Some healing potions, there was a water-breathing potion, animal friendship potion. I don't believe anybody bought anything from her, though. They also went to the smith. They found out that the smith happens to be a large angry gal who is mad at Mother Salvenza. Because her husband ran off to want to become a bard. However, when the group got to, oh, look, and oh, it's her. She actually apologized for being rude, and she found out that her husband had been cheating on her the whole time, and she's better off without him because he ran off and left her the forge, all their goods. She's actually in a pretty good spot, and she's a pretty good smith herself. So she's not hurting, and she's already getting proposals from men because she's set pretty well. So, she won't be lonely for very long. So, a happy story all the way around. The group was like, well, what have you got? And she was showing off some of her wares, but what she really had that was pretty cool, she had a selection of Cerak iron weapons. These aren't magical weapons per se, but because the metal is so fine, this iron holds an edge better than steel. It is flexible but returns to true. It's resistant to rusting. It's resistant to staining. It's very good metal. And she knows the secret on how to make it, even though it's expensive and time-consuming. The weapons that they make are excellent. And she has a pick, a war pick that is made with the stuff. She has a few nice things, but she has a Cerak iron longsword, and Haranen's heart went bum, 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 bum. He uses a longsword. It's a great weapon for him with his size, his hands which are huge, his muscles which are strong. When he gets up and he hits something with his longsword, it feels it. If he uses it two hands, it's great. If he uses a shield to protect himself a little bit more, it's still effective. He likes the longsword. And it was just what he could afford with a bit of help. I believe it was Vanessa who floated him the money for it, which I'm sure he's very grateful for. But all in all, she just made their fighter a little bit more effective. For somebody who stands in front of her and risking taking damage, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. It's an investment. So he has a new nice sword that he gets to play with. And so now there are 3 members of the group who have these weapons, and 2 of them have already been blooded. The Cerak iron longsword, or short sword, of Glyn, which he's used quite effectively, and Crendon having that Cerak iron wakizashi that he likes. Just exotic and fits his style. So all in all, it's been going pretty good for them for the stuff. And we're going to have, of course, next week, we've got a new member coming in. And he has a magical weapon. So everything is going pretty well for the fighting members of the group. Then they went to the... well, because Smedley wanted to, they went to visit the toy shop. And I think we might have a new star of the show. Because at the toy shop they met a couple of halflings who were running it. And they had a few nice items. For one thing, they had a Malachite Frog that the party bought. I think that was Crendon who bought it, or... Yeah. Turns out... No, I think it was Glyn who bought it.
Glyn,
yeah, Glyn bought it. It turns out it's a figurine of wondrous power. It could turn into a giant toad, which is actually a really good monster if you're going to have as a buddy. So, not a bad item for him to get. It cost him 10 gold. Practically nothing, honestly. So he got a very nice item. And then they were asked if they wanted to buy a magical item for a copper. And Haranen's like, sure. And they were sold the Insult Golem. The Insult Golem looks like a little marionette, or one of those posing figures that models for artists. Very, very bare bones. But it has a mouth and a face. And once he grabbed it, it started insulting anybody around. And I don't hold back. He can insult people. Yeah, whatever he can think of to insult. He will throw insults. Ah, I see that you have a longsword. Obviously, you're compensating for something. Don't worry, I won't tell all the ladies. They already know. You know, stuff like that. He is capable of being crude. He is capable of being highbrow. He is truly a master of the insulting art. When Haranen wanted him to start insulting Smedley, he looked at Smedley and goes, You are my spirit animal. And they wouldn't insult Smedley. So the group has been entertained by the insult golem for a bit. But he has gone around and given everybody a good insult, I think. So it's been fun. So, and of course, too, whenever things get slow or dull or it gets too quiet or people are too thinky, the insult golem can fish his way out of the pack and start insulting people. So, as long as Rhiannon keeps him. Fun. A few other items were had for the group, but for the most part, they got their fun. And then they decided they were going to continue along to the animal pens. And there they saw that, well, there was a bit of a problem. See, the druid of the group, who happens to be Vanessa's mentor, told them, she is the animal handler, and she told them, we have some boars that we captured. They're going to be food for the monsters. An owlbear and a manticore. Great, exotic-looking creatures that work well for this effect. Capable of being trained. She's pretty good with them. But there are these local kids who are making the boar's life miserable, and we really want to stop them. Can you take care of it? This group of kids is called the Dragon Puncher Club, or the Dragon Puncher Gang, one or the other. And they're a bunch of kids, brats, who just delight in causing problems, and they're throwing things at these boars and poking at them with sticks and just generally making their lives miserable. Well, if you know anything about boars, they don't have the longest fuse. They have a pretty short temper and prone to violence. So eventually, when they just pushed the one biggest boar too far, he smashed through the iron cage that they had set up. The boars got out. Guess who was in front of them? The group. So the group decided they were going to take on the boars. The boars. And, well, sleep spell. Knocked out one of the kids, one harmless pedestrian, and one boar. So that left 2 boars. So wrong. Anyhow, so the group broke into melee. Hey, these things were going to get butchered anyhow. And they were able to whet their blades. And boy, did they ever. Those boars, when they charged, they could deliver a nasty blow. Crendon found that out. It was completely random. It was just a scrum where these boars came charging out. So it was purely random who they went after. One, I believe, went after Brandel. One went after Crendon. One went after Glyn, but one got knocked unconscious. Crendon got hit, gored, slashed, and this pig was just driving into him. Well, that's when everybody got to use their new toys. Turns out the group can really lay down thunder when they need to. You don't need to worry too much about the one on Brandel. It couldn't hit her. And she started using Shocking Grasp, kind of like a picador in a bullfight. Just kept zapping it as it went by her. And it just couldn't seem to hit. I was rolling very badly for combat for this. And she eventually zapped it and gave it the old iron claw to its head and cooked bacon. Yay! But the group showed they were very competent, and they killed the pigs. They kept one alive, so they still have meat on the hoof, which is good, because that preserves the length of time that they can... If they had just slaughtered them all, wouldn't have been as great. But the excess meat they sent off to the food truck, so boar's good eating if you know how to prepare it, and their cooks definitely do. Also, they were allowed to feed the manticore and the owlbear, which... that was nice too. Well, they liked the food. So then, after that, so the group then decided, again, because they had been strongly suggested by Borag to keep an eye on the gamblers' tents. Usually feelings would flare up and fights would regularly break out of the gambling tents as people would be stripped of their last coppers if they were willing to bet them. It is well known that since you didn't have future customers to cultivate, this is the time when all the gamblers for the Hanataz are playing for keeps. Whereas before, they might let some silvers walk out on occasion, maybe the odd gold to get people's hopes inflamed. Now, you put your money on the table, they will go for it. Not saying people don't beat them from time to time. They know how to cheat, but they don't always do it. Just enough to make sure that they're going to end up on the winning side of the balance sheet. But they get over there, and the Great Clasby, probably the coolest looking guy in the place. I absolutely love his portrait because he is so awesome. Mm-hmm. The Great Clasby is supervising two Sarth who are fighting. Sarth are exotic looking people. They have orange skin and purple hair. They also are unique among the peoples of Ziathe because they are cut off from the magical flow of the world. They cannot cast magics. But that also means that they can handle what is basically pure crystallized magic called flowstones safely, because they will poison anybody else who tries to handle them. The Sarth can do it, and some of them got very, very good at cutting flowstones for use in magical items, and that made them very wealthy and very well off. Not that some of them are probably enslaved for mining for such things too, but in general, their people are tough, rugged, and they're good with flowstones. And their flowcasters are pretty scary too. They use flowstones to do magic, which is kind of cool. But those won't be available until the Ziathe Magic Compendium comes out, which will eventually come out. Anywho, so these two Sarth are fighting. They're known to be a bit hot-headed sometimes and stubborn. And these two are just ripping it up in a big wrestling match in the front. And Clasby looks at the group and says, "Can you get them out of here? They're both cheats and liars, and they're ruining the game." So, it now comes upon the group time to deal with this expediently. Because again, they're being graded on a curve here. The better they can get rid of these guys with the least amount of fuss, the happier everybody will be. For the most part, Haranen really embraced this, and he's big and strong enough to pull it off. He actually went up to one of them and just tied him up. He actually just... In professional wrestling, there's an actual term called to stretch someone. That is to go in and legitimately wrestle a person and grapple them until you have taken away their ability to fight. Either exhausted them, put them in a lock they can't get out of, or something like that. Haranen stretched this guy. There's no getting around it. Once he laid hands on the guy, he was rolling out of his mind, and the Sarth, who is as big and as strong as Haranen, was putty in his hands. And I wasn't rolling terribly, but I couldn't beat it. I couldn't beat Haranen in any of his rolls. So Haranen basically grabbed him, knocked him down, hooked him, lifted him bodily over his head, and walked him out of the Carnivalle. Gone. One whole combatant out of the way, left the whole group to deal with the other one. The problem is, none of the rest of the group are Haranen. Glenn is pretty strong, but he's quicker. So going toe-to-toe with the guy might not have had the same effect. The two spellcasters are not feeble, but again, they're not masters of strength, and pretty much everybody has used up so much juice that their ability to debilitate him has been sapped, if not completely gone. I don't think Crendon has a hideous laughter spell, which really would have worked out great. I'm pretty sure most of the other spellcasters are out of sleep spells, and an entangle spell would have just gotten everybody. So their options for magic were kind of limited. So what was it? Beatdown. They, again, pulled out Quarterstaff from Brandel and was trying to sweep his legs out from underneath him. First hit, his leg was hard as a rock, and she just couldn't do. I rolled natural 20 to resist her attempt to knock him down. And the other thing, too, is attempting to knock somebody down with a weapon is kind of a signature ability from the battle master branch of the fighters. So I don't generally like to allow players to mimic abilities that other people have. So judiciously, if she rolls particularly well, it has a chance of working, and it is resisted with a strength test. In this case, he didn't get knocked down from that, but he did get knocked down by a later blow because she kept trying. Glenn wanted to pull out a weapon and ventilate him, but he then realized that that's murder and doesn't go well for the Hanatas who start killing people. That generally goes very, very badly, either causing the whole troop to run away while a pack of lawmen come, or they just turn over the person who murdered somebody because they knew better, they shouldn't have done it, and there's nothing the troop can do. The troop has to survive. So, yeah, he thought better of it and then joined in, trying to jump on his back and restrain the Sarth, who, because he's really agile, he's clingy. So he zipped around the front of him as the guy's strength was too much, and he ended up in kind of grabbing his chest, which was funny, because when he fell down crushing on top of poor Glenn. So all told, it was a general fracas that eventually led to this guy just getting beaten unconscious. Clasby was not happy with how they dealt with that one. He was very happy with Haranan's escort mission. But rather than dogpiling and group grappling the guy, they chose to beat him down. And it was a bit of a spectacle and turned away a lot of the gamblers who really weren't there to see a guy getting beat to unconsciousness. And they walked him out and dumped him off with his friend, who, after the fight, they got into, the two Sarth, they know each other. They are friends. So the one that was still conscious took the other one with him. So that is where we left off. Those encounters did take a fair amount of time. A lot of good role-playing went on, so good on everybody. And again, the group did really well. A little bit of damage was had. Of course, I did say that Crendon had gotten slashed quite viciously from the boars. He was healed by Savra, so the group should be still in fairly good condition. A couple of punches that were landed, just subdual damage, and will go away after a little while. So while the group may be fairly exhausted from magic, they have gotten past noon, and time is running out on this, the last night of the Carnivalle. So will they miss all that magic they've spent already? Will they come up across something nasty in the next encounter? Who knows? Well, I do, but they could take the path they will. But we will find out together in next session of the State of the Dungeon Address, if you're not here at the table. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. This is a fascinating adventure. Can't endorse enough. The group loves it. You've seen a little bit of the art. It's a great session. Next week, a new combatant steps into the ring as we have another player joining the group. Should be interesting, and add another level to the dynamics of this group. Another fighter, which should make the spellcasters happier, that they don't have to risk themselves quite as much, and we'll see if Haranan can find ways to work together with the new fighter and become even better. So, until that time, I'm Rob. This has been my State of the Dungeon Address. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, farewell.